Joining me now is Dr. Alan Mendoza, who's Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. A very good afternoon to you.
Hello, David.
This is a very complicated situation. I've been talking about it for the past week. Of course, we're now reaching a point where we've got all of these people trapped, innocent civilians trapped in this, Hamas hiding behind innocent civilians, a network of tunnels in Gaza. We have Israel, as I keep saying, that has a sovereign right to defend itself from these terrorists. Of course, Hamas is a proscribed terrorist organization, but at the same time, there is this sense of anticipation, of dread, as this ground invasion starts, or we believe it will start imminently. Just in terms of the geopolitics, what's your sense about the players in this? Because you've got Hezbollah, Lebanon, Syria, you've got Iran also being warned not to get involved as well.
Well, David, you've summed up the situation perfectly. It's a mess. It's a mess, though, because as we all know, Hamas terrorists broke through into Israel last Saturday and massacred Israeli civilians. That's what's caused this whole conflict. And of course, unfortunately, in the bid to secure and remove Hamas from Gaza, there has to be a ground invasion because there's no other way of doing it. And unfortunately, that means, of course, that innocent civilians who are living in Gaza are caught up in it. I mean, one way to resolve this, which of course won't happen, is for Hamas to surrender, come out and say, right, we're here, and for others to put pressure on. That's not going to happen, of course. But this is the reality of urban warfare. This is the reality of what happens when you have a situation where a terrorist entity or a group like ISIS or Hamas are holed up into areas, hiding behind civilians. They've got to be cleared out, as we cleared out ISIS. Let's not forget, in the last few years from Iraq and Syria, we had to go into towns and cities to do it, and we had to sometimes do that amidst civilians. So it's very, very difficult. But to look at the geopolitical side, of course, the big question that everyone wants to avoid, and you've already been discussing it, is how do you stop this from becoming an even bigger conflict? And you've got, of course, that Hezbollah situation on the northern front. Hezbollah backed entirely by Iran. Iran is the sort of the player behind the scenes, the one that isn't openly in the game, but is helping to direct operations, particularly in the north there. You've got the Israelis trying to, warn Hezbollah off from joining. You've got the Americans trying to keep everyone, all tempers down, and trying to sort of keep this as just a Gaza-Israel thing, telling both Hezbollah and Iran, if you get involved, well, we're going to get involved as well. So it only takes one little trigger, one false move by Hezbollah would be initially, and then suddenly this could spiral very, very badly.
And just in terms of that, I found it fascinating that Joe Biden has warned Israel about reoccupying Gaza, because obviously what is the end game here? What is Israel going to do? Sure, a ground offensive. As you said, there are civilians trapped there, but they have to then get through a network of tunnels. They have to root out Hamas. But what do they do after that? So Biden has said this is not about taking back that land.
I don't think the Israelis want to take back that land. I mean, let's not forget, the Israelis walked out of Gaza in 2005 because they realised there was no benefit to them being there. Controlling that land did not solve any problems. I've got to say, though, that the way to handle this has to be to remove Hamas as the entity that's clearly causing great disruption and atrocities in the area. And then if you're going to remove them from the area, you can't leave a vacuum. You can't just go, right, well, there's nothing going on. Your choices, you pointed out, are to reoccupy it, which is a very bad option for the Israelis and would not go down well for them or for anyone else. Or you try and hand it over to another party or power to run in a different way. And surely one of the things that we should be considering is, should either Egypt return in some form, having been the previous occupying power in the area, or should it be that the PA, which was in charge, of course, until Hamas threw them out in 2007 and just took it over and ended their should they come back and should they run it? Or should a third party, should there be, a strong person of some kind come in and run it as a new independent entity, but with the goal of either re-emerging and reuniting with the West Bank to form a cohesive Palestinian entity, or, does a deal with Israel in a different sort of way. But there has to be some progress. I quite agree with you. And certainly Israel occupying that land would not be progress.
So just in terms of where we are, and I obviously it is a very complicated situation. I think many people in this country are so confused about all of the moving parts and trying to understand what is a very difficult international situation. But America very much favours a two-state solution. I just wonder, is this because actually this is now focusing the minds? Now something has to happen. This cannot be allowed to continue in the same way that it has been allowed to happen.
Yeah, I think people are aware that this can't continue. I think there are two component parts to that. The first bit of this can't continue is that it's quite clear that Hamas must be removed from the from Gaza. Whatever you thought about Hamas before this, whatever you thought that, oh, they might be moderating, they might be willing partners for peace, you don't go and hack to death 1,300 Israelis, rape, kidnap. That's not a partner for peace in any way, shape or form. It's quite clear that ideologically this group has to go. There's no prospect of them staying. But if that group does go, and don't forget that group being there has, of course, prevented Palestinian unity. They're the ones who have separated, the two Palestinian territories, as it were, from one another because they've refused to deal with Fatah and the PA, and they've insisted on, kind of trying to seize control for themselves. If they are removed, it actually helps move the cause of Palestinian unity forwards. And if you move the cause of Palestinian unity forwards, that then brings into sharp relief the ability then to bring the Israelis round the table as well and to pressure both sides and say, look, you've now got a partner in the form of the Palestinians who are united. You Palestinians have got to deal with Israel. Israel, you're going to deal with these people. And we're going to come to the contours of a deal, which we all know has been there for some time, been there for the last 20 years on the table, trying to persuade people to actually come round in this crisis and something positive to come from it, which could be a resolution of this, backed up crucially, David, I think, by the idea of a Saudi peace deal on the table accompanying it as well. So you could think very big here, and potentially I think the Americans have woken up to bring the two sides of this together. But I come back to this, the essential prerequisite is that Hamas must be expelled first because they are no partner for peace for either the Palestinians or for the Israelis.
And of course, as you said, this deal's been on the table for some 20 years. And of course, Saudi has certainly warned in terms of its relationship with Israel. Of course, there are other states that would not like this to happen. They don't want that accord to happen. I'm looking at Iran here.
Of course, the Iranians are a spoiler. What they're trying to do is keep the region weak and divided, because what they would like nothing better is for internal squabbling, internal sapping of the forces of positivity in the region, and of course others being dragged into it. They'd love the Americans to be dragged into it as well, because it gives them the ability, if you like, to fight fire or to light fires away from their homeland, and then to take advantage by using their pressure that they can exert through terrorist groups and through militia groups in the region to further their cause, because they would like to be the top dog in the region. That's their goal, basically. They want all power to flow to them, and they will stop at nothing to do that, including, of course, murdering innocents to get there. So you're quite right to point out they would oppose this, but the reality is there's enough strength in the region and in the West, and surely internationally, to say to the parties, look, we want peace, we want a solution in Iran, you're going to have to get back into your box as well, because you are a regressive, not a progressive force, and you're on the side of war, not on the side of peace.
So we're expecting a statement from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, shortly. What is the role for the United Kingdom here? Because obviously we are sending support, military support. We've seen that. We've sent various parts of military support. But this is much more in a supportive role rather than in an antagonistic role.
Yeah, we're not, a party in the sense to the conflict. We're not about to get involved on the ground or in the air, in fact, for that matter. What I think we're doing is showing support to Israel and, crucially, adding to that diplomatic effort to warn the Iranians in particular to not escalate this. I think right now the greatest problem would emerge if you had a northern front opening up with Hezbollah, if you had the Americans then dragged in, potentially us coming in as well, dealing with Iran at the other end. And you could end up with a regional, potentially even international conflagration. Now, it's in no one's interest for that to happen. So really what we have to do is focus on ensuring the Iranians stay out of it. The Israelis can get on with the job they have to do, that we all recognize they have to do, which is to remove the terrorist entity of Hamas there, as difficult as that's going to be, for them obviously to do it in a manner that minimizes civilian casualties. But, we can give them lessons on that. Don't forget, we did that in Iraq and Syria with ISIS. We did that with Al-Qaeda. We had to focus on those situations, and at times it was ugly, but we got the job done. And I think everyone recognizes that it's a messy process to get there. You can try as much as you can to mitigate problems, but ultimately this has to end with the removal of Hamas as the objective that everyone shares.
I just wonder what your thoughts were on the demonstrations taking part that took place across the United Kingdom in support of the Palestinian people. Of course, the chants, people covering their faces, the smoke bombs, those people chanting pro-Hamas slogans. Obviously, Hamas, as I said, is a proscribed terrorist organisation. Do you think the police did a good job?
I'm afraid not. I have to say that the Home Secretary gave very clear guidance as to what should be happening, and very little has occurred. I think, a handful of people have been arrested. But we've discovered today, for example, that on the cenotaph, as you will have seen, the cenotaph was basically the site of a pro-Palestinian rally at which slogans were shouted in favour of Hamas and in favour of death to the Jews and such like. That is a national insult that the cenotaph, which represents our war dead, was abused in that way. Now, I can tell you that no permission was given for that structure to be set up there. No permission was given for a rally to occur at the cenotaph. It wasn't given by the local council, of which I'm actually a councillor. And that therefore tells you something's gone wrong at the police end as to why that wasn't cleared. And why are the police in this country, David, terrified, it would appear, of the mob? Why are they so scared to clear away people who are acting illegally or acting in a way that is against public order? What is going on in the UK today that they're able to do this, and people are as a result, are terrified to go out in the streets because of this aggression?